Look, here's another serious question, and do raise your hand. Has anyone got stuck patients in your practice? Of course we do. We're GPs. This is what we do. A lot of the time we are there to comfort and support and offer compassion and hopefully help to move things along by various means. And for me, medicinal cannabis has been often an exciting new modality. For others it might be fact, and there are many ways, and often I think they all work in together. So I ask my patients about mindfulness and meditation, and really I say, look, here's the CBD and here's the mindfulness. I want you to be doing all of these things together. It really does make a difference. So yes, we've all got stuck patients where conventional treatments are not working. Let's just go back to the first talk today. So controlled drugs, so class A, heroin, amphetamines, very high risk of harm. B, high risk of harm. And this is where the problem was, because initially it was meant to be about hash oil, but when the CBD oil came along, it was seen as a high risk of harm. So Andrea told us from MedSafe that that's now been removed, so it's in its own class now, and that's why we can all prescribe the CBD oil. And then further down, this is where cannabis plant fits in. It's a class C, and compared to the harms of these other agents that we routinely prescribe. This is perhaps a good reminder that under Section 29, we heard earlier that these are new or unconsented or unapproved. These are all confusing terms, but it does mean that you need to perhaps document some sort of consent from the patient that you're prescribing a Section 29 item. But ironically, for something that's new, no person shall advertise the availability of any medicine such as this here in my hand. And it just puts me in a difficult position. It puts Tilray in a difficult position. If it's new and you're worried about getting messages about using and safety, and MedSafe block the advertising of it, it's a real inconsistency. I think I picked up from the first talk that will change, but right now perhaps I have to be careful what I tell you about the availability of Tilray CBD 100, unless anyone else can understand the regulations. So that's how it goes. Hey, 6 pathways to medicinal cannabis, and this is trying to put in practical terms what we heard, and the very excellent flow chart that you've got at the end of Andrea Eng's first talk this morning. So we'll go to that flow chart, and it's good that you've got that there on the back page. So this is a man using Sativex, and my patients tell me that spraying it on your tongue seems to be the way to go. There are YouTube videos spraying it inside your mouth. We'll get back to Sativex. So first of all, I'll talk about CBD products, and then I'll talk about Sativex. I think not spend too much time on these other items which are unnecessarily complicated, and perhaps for beginners, leaving knowing how to do CBD would be a really useful thing today. So good, you've got that flow chart in front of you, and let's start at the start. And so is it a CBD product? Yes. And an application for approval is not required. So as you've heard over and over, all doctors can prescribe CBD. And yes, Peter Dunn announced this back 2 years ago almost now. And as we heard from the first speaker, it must be at least 98% CBD. And also, all medical practitioners or pharmacists may import this without a license, yes, we can prescribe without the approval of CBD, without the Ministry of Health. I had a go at importing. It was a nightmare and I lost money on it, and I don't entirely recommend it as a way to go. The barriers involved through that are terrible, really, and they just don't make sense. They don't support patient welfare. But talk to me at lunchtime if you want to know how to do that. Okay. So we don't need to keep a controlled drug pad for CBD. Probably we won't have it in our office unless we have imported. So this is a slide from Professor Nick Linceres in Sydney, an addiction professor, and he reminds us that CBD is a non-intoxicating cannabinoid with anticonvulsant, anxiolytic, antipsychotic, neuroprotective, analgesic properties. And this is why I'm using it in a huge range of conditions and pleased with the results. Perhaps I can ask Merrin, attendees access to these slides?
Yes, they'll be emailed out on Monday.
There we go. Fine. Look, what I've found, and I'll show you a dosing schedule, 50 milligrams twice a day. It's kind of a strange number that seems to work for lots of things, so that can be a target to keep in mind. So look, it's got all of these properties, and look, this is where I'll just have my little OCD comment about is CBD psychoactive. You'll read over and over that CBD is the non-psychoactive part of cannabis compared to THC that is psychoactive. Well, yep, I've said if you want the euphoria, you want the THC, and some people use psychoactive for that. But don't you think psychoactive might cover anxiolytic, antipsychotic? So the literature misuses this term, and some would say psychotropic. It doesn't have psychotropic properties. For me, I use the term euphoriant from THC and non-euphoriant from CBD, or perhaps impairing or intoxicating from THC and non-impairing from CBD. I think the literature is confused about the use of the word psychoactive. CBD is psychoactive. It's anxiolytic. It helps people sleep. So yes, also there was kind of a dose range there, and that dose range anything from 200 to 1200. So at 100 milligrams a day, patients are paying $20 a day. How many are going to go to 1200 milligrams a day? Look, it's cost that's the big inequity when it comes to this at the moment. And PHARMAC tell me that approaches are being made for subsidies, but without the clinical studies, it's the best hope of reducing cost is competition in the market. So yes, you can get the CBD 25. I stopped prescribing it because early on I thought it wasn't working. People were wasting their money. So I've got a little bottle there. These are 25 ml bottles. Oh, sorry, I'm not allowed to tell you that it's available. It's from Cannabis in Canada, and it's put in these dinky bottles, put in a fridge, put in a safe, sent to Sydney, sent to Christchurch, sent to your pharmacy. And no wonder the price is just absurd. So I'm prescribing pretty much only CBD 100. The best Auckland prices, I think the best Wellington prices are $800. My local pharmacy will courier CBD prescriptions out to people around the country. And the pharmacy actually makes $15 on this 475. Chemist Warehouse from Australia have moved in and just dumped the prices way down. So that's where we are at the moment. One bottle at $1 ml a day is going to last 25 days. Out of the fridge, it's stable for 6 months. Basically, it's in grapeseed oil. It's like, how do you look after your cooking oil at home? Well, in a dark place is fine. Okay, here is my prescription. I don't do this anymore, so This is the CBD 100 prescription, so you do need to set something up in your system. I had 6 interesting months with my practice before I went back to medtech. My practice was great for easy adding on new items like this. MedTech is a nightmare for adding on new stuff, but go to the help desk and figure it out, and put Tilray CBD 100 in, and this is my standard script. Take 1/4 ml at night and increase as directed. I put the contact person's phone number there. The pharmacy may have to get it in for them in the next day or two. So it's a 25 ml bottle. I like to see them before they run out of the first bottle, work out what dose they're on, is it working, isn't it working, and where do we go from there. So that's kind of it. Take 1/4 ml at night, and here it is from Tilray, and you'll be getting this on Monday in the copy of these slides, so you may find that this is a good one. 1/4 ml at night, total per day. Basically it steps up by 1/4 ml a day. This is simplicity for twice daily dosing. For those who are up to it, QID dosing after meals and bedtime I think works better. But who can remember QID? Well, we do have obsessive patients who know exactly when they've taken the last dose, and actually will take another dose at 3 in the morning because it works for them. So it's very forgiving as medication, and patients are in charge. They can work out what suits them there. There's no top limit there. It's an oncologist who refers to me termed the phrase financial toxicity is the main issue with CBD. So really at this dose here, 1 ml a day, $19 or $20 a day. And that's a dose that I found very helpful. Adverse effects, Bruce and our summer student have helped go through the data I've collected on 400 people last year, and we found around 10% had these sort of adverse effects, and they're pretty minor compared to a lot of medication adverse effects. Drowsiness can be beneficial for many people, slight diarrhea in a few, and the bottom line, as I've said there. Drug-drug interactions. I've spent a bit of time with a Californian doctor. You saw Jeffrey Hergenrather there. 2 weeks ago I was in Sydney talking to a Canadian doctor with 20 years experience. These are both GPs doing what we could all be doing, and they said, look, in reality drug-drug interactions are most unlikely, and so clobazam might be one that you'd watch for. And again, you're probably looking, how often are you treating children on clobazam and adding CBD? Well, it's unusual, but one day that might be a question. Warfarin, I get people to do more frequent INRs. I haven't seen any concern with changes there. I don't have patients very often on ketoconazole. This week someone on domperidone said that, well, the 8-year-old girl hated the taste of it anyway and she'd be glad to stop it to switch for CBD, so we're not going to have an interaction risk there. So there are ways around these things if it's safe. Look, another concept is, I tell patients, it's an add-on. Keep taking your regular medication, add on the CBD for 2 or 3 weeks. And look, they'll come back and they'll say, oh, I stopped my diazepam, I'm not anxious anymore. Well, people will do things like that, but you might be a bit more nervous if they're cutting back on anticonvulsants or antidepressants, antipsychotics. Hopefully they'd do that in discussion with you or other prescribers. But as we know, patients don't take stuff that they don't like, and if they find that you're giving them something better in the way of CBD, don't be surprised if they come back and the person who said, look, yeah, I stopped my lorazepam and I stopped my citalopram because the CBD works way better, and my life's changed. So once you start getting a few people telling you these things, it'll give you confidence. So back to the flow chart on your table there. This time we're focusing on this area here. Pharmaceutical grade product, yes. with consent was the term that Andrea used. Well, there's only one thing there, and that is the Sativex. And just a few more details. So actually, we can all prescribe Sativex. And I've got the box there. So maybe look at that momentarily. So Sativex, the current price in Auckland is $900. And you've got 3 little squirter bottles. And Sativex contains a balance of THC and CBD. And these squirter bottles, you just spray onto your tongue. Now, you'll hear all sorts of prices, outrageous prices that people are paying. Well, each bottle's got 90 sprays. If you are taking 3 sprays a day, that's a month's supply. And that bottle, sure, it's outrageous at $300, but $300 a month for many people is affordable. Who was asking on the radio yesterday for a breast cancer tablet that she's paying $285 each time she swallows a tablet? Well, it's not as bad as some people quote. If you're taking 12 sprays a day, sure, it's $50 a day. But really, this is Sativex, and how can we all prescribe it? Well, we just have to state with approval, with permission, the neurologist's name to say that this person has got multiple sclerosis with spasms not managed by conventional medicine. So you can actually just write a prescription for 30 mils, 10 mils times 3. They don't break it down, it's one standard pack, and off they go. And we'll see the dosing sheet shortly. So Sativex for non-consented reasons, if you're following your flow chart there. Here we go, I've blown it up for you. And this involves an application form, a 2-page form for unapproved or non-consented. It needs a GP and specialist signature. Does anyone in the room consider themselves to be a specialist GP? I do. And I'm bloody annoyed that my patients have to go through a specialist and the Ministry of Health for something that is way less harmful than the oxycodone, the warfarin, the risperidone that I could prescribe and kill my patients, and they won't die from this. I'd like to think of us all as specialists with the ability to prescribe this without this complicated and inconvenient for patients, expensive process that we have to go through. But that's what the flow chart tells us. It's guidelines, but try and get MedSafe to show flexibility around guidelines. They are very rigid, black and white type people, so good luck. We need to speak out on that one there. As GPs, we deal with personalised medicine as often as we deal with evidence-based medicine, and so we need to support our patients. I think the good news is that we can use Sativex for any condition that we believe is helpful, and it's not a narrow, restricted range. So patients might say, am I dying of cancer? Well, I'm not, and can I still get this? Well, actually, under some conditions, if a specialist will sign it, you can get approval. So, if you want to apply for I'll get to you soon. If you want to apply for Sativex, then go to MedSafe, Sativex data sheet, link to application form. It used to be 6 pages, now it's 2, and it's actually fairly simple. All I do is write down the indication, I put my details in there, I sign down there, the patient signs there, but they have to find a specialist who will stamp and sign down there. It's kind of simple, but what an imposition for our patients. We're dealing with sick people and they have to go through all of this to get the Sativex spray. Okay, on with my story. So yes, a 2-page form. Hey, look, if the CBD is not working, then this is the next step. It would be great to have something between CBD and this, which is balanced, equal THC CBD. I'd like to prescribe something in between. Tilray say that they've now got approval for 100 CBD to 2 of THC, but it's not in the country yet. So I don't know how you're going to find out about it because they're not allowed to advertise it when it does get here. Yeah. Okay, next. Sativex dosing, good. You'll get this on Monday, and it's kind of simple. That like the Tilray CBD, you start with 1 dose at night, and just gradually increase it. So, in honour of Linda Williams, who was a patient advocate, who was my first patient on Sativex. She died of pancreatic cancer. It gives me permission to tell her story. She helped me get this through the system, and so I prescribed for her. 67-year-old pancreatic cancer. She said, I can use 1 spray at 4 in the afternoon, and it gives me an appetite for dinner, and I use another one at bedtime, and it helps me sleep. If I use more than that, I get stoned, I get mental blurring, and my time's precious. I don't want that. I'm not using it in the morning, I'm still driving, and so on. So, look, there are patients, perhaps in the older group, where a couple of sprays later in the day, even for chronic pain, might be the thing. But I've also got a glioblastoma patient who's using more like 10 sprays a day with funding from his family, and you build a tolerance, and he feels that he does drive safely with his brain tumour and his cannabis. So yeah, there's a dosing schedule for Sativex. Start in the evening, and one of the adages with medicinal cannabis is start low, go slow. So yeah, look at the data sheet, and we've got some of the side effects there. Appetite changes, which is where it's recommended in cachexia with HIV and cancer, but people can find antidepressant effects or depression, just like SSRIs make some people wakey and some people sleepy. We'll get the opposite effects with this as well. So start low, go slow, just build it up. Drug-drug interactions, again, P450 metabolism, and as I've mentioned earlier, so these are unusual drugs, but you might want to be watching out if you've got those. Of course, additive effects with other sedatives and with alcohol. But in practical terms, most people won't have drug-drug interactions as an issue. Prescribing pharmaceutical grade cannabis, look, just to highlight, the government does not support plant material for use by patients, and so getting that through MedSafe is unlikely at this stage. Moving down the chart here, so non-pharmaceutical grade, there is a whole application form. I think just know that specialists can do it, but the only specialist in the country who's doing this is in this room. I suspect there might be 1 or 2 others who have prescribed Tilray CBD THC, but it's just about impossible to get, and this is where I think we are better placed to serve our patients than a specialist in a very narrow field. It would be good if we could have access to this sort of medicine. There's the list of criteria, it just goes on and on. Compassionate cannabis, well, this is where you will all have patients who are using compassionate cannabis, and basically this is illegal weed that is smoked or vaped or cooked up into oils or remedies. And so Medical Cannabis Awareness New Zealand can inform patients about that. Other questions, medicines control at MOH, and BPAC had an article last year that gives a bit of a summary as well. So a comment on the bill last year about possessing and using illicit cannabis. This is about palliation. So, we can write medical certificates, and you may get asked to do these. And this is an example that is online. And I thought I had the reference. Is it on the next page? Oh, yeah. These things are hard to find on the internet, but basically we can all write a letter saying that I examined X, and X has an advanced progressive life-limiting condition and nearing the end of their life, and requires palliation to ease their symptoms. That way, if they are caught with plant cannabis, there may be grounds for the court to exempt them from prosecution. Okay, look, we're moving on, nearly at the end. So importing CBD, so doctors and pharmacists can import it without a license and without the approval of the ministry, but under section 29 you can import. If you've got a list of patients, you can then go and import for people on that list. So I made a list, and it took 2 months to go through the processes, and by the time I rang the people to say, hey, I've got your lozenges from Switzerland, they said, oh no, it doesn't work for me, or I can't afford it, or no, I've changed my mind. And sure, go ahead and do it, but the other thing is Tilray dropped their prices to below what it was costing me to import it for patients. So I'm a better clinician than business person, I think, so not highly recommended. But yes, you do have the ability to import. But the other part of this story is when your patient says, hey, can I import it? Well, I point out that actually it's illegal to export from the USA because it's still a federal, it's still illegal at a federal level, so that blocks exportation. But people are going online and are getting it in until they get a letter from Customs New Zealand saying, we've noticed that you've been importing this hemp oil or this CBD oil, and we're holding one, and prescription from the doctor might release it, or please stop doing that. There's the sort of letters that they're getting. So an advisor at the MOH said to the patient, if it's for you, ensure it's appropriately labelled, less than 3 months supply, needs a prescription from a registered doctor that matches all of these details here. So we can write prescriptions either before or after they've imported it, and include it in the package, and so on. So has anyone been asked to support patients on this? No, only me. Well, okay, this may well happen. And look, Bruce, indulge me a minute. A year ago I went to the East Coast, Hikurangi Hemp, with their licensed hemp, a long way from the real thing, which to be standardised is going to be in glass houses, but a license to grow that. And from the internet, this is a trichome. If you blow up an image of the bud, this is a green petal from a cannabis plant. These are the trichomes, the little hairs, and this is described as having a frosty appearance, which is seen as a positive term. And these little trichomes are the factories where the petals of the female plant make the cannabinoids and the terpenes. And it's the sticky resin on the outside. And this is where people who are vaping, buying their desktop vape and putting it in the chamber, what you're doing is you're heating the sticky resins from the outside of the petal and inhaling that. It's at a lower temperature than burning it. There's not the soot in the tar, so heat not burn is what vaping's all about. You're not getting the products of combustion, but actually all the talks that I go to say that cannabis smoking has not been associated with an increase in lung cancer. Shock horror. This is not what we as doctors know and understand and believe, but over and over I'm hearing this from experts. It may be associated with increased mucus, with chronic bronchitis, but not with increased cancer. And it's thought that some of those cannabinoids and terpenes have anti-inflammatory properties, and that they may be protective actually of lung cancer. Apologies if that's just too much to take, but also for those, ask your patients about smoking, and for those dedicated cannabis joint smokers, particularly spliffs where there's a mix of cannabis and tobacco, suggest that they go online to the, we've lost it, to the hemp store and get a vaping device, which is illegal, but in terms of harm reduction, they are heating up plant material and vaporising it and taking it in like an asthma inhaler. And look, in terms of what's illegal, it's good to talk to patients, and you can say, look, I'm a doctor, I can't support illegal activity, but I understand that this is what you're doing, and can we make it safer? Rather than your bong or your joint, perhaps a vaping device with a lower temperature and less, no combustibles is going to be a safer option for you. So that ends my talk this morning. I've got some case histories and some outcomes of cases later on, so thanks for listening.